So here we have the sample 941X that we're going to use to adjust the 941 for 2020 second quarter. Okay, so this section here is pretty simple to fill out. So you're adjusting the 941 and doing it for the second quarter. Here you enter the calendar year, the quarter you're correcting. So this would be 2020, right? And then enter the date you discovered errors. So whenever you find out that, hey, I should claim this, I'm eligible to claim the ERC, enter that date there, okay? You want to use a separate 941X for each quarter that needs correcting. And that's for, regularly, this is what you would do. So any quarter that needs a correction, of course, you would gather all the corrections that need to be made so that you only file one of these adjustments and not several, okay? So most of the time, you're going to be using just one form for each quarter. You do have that through the Relief Act. You do have that stipulation that some employers, if they found out during the fourth quarter 2020 that they qualified for this credit and they wanted to take it and they didn't want to adjust every single 941 in the appropriate quarters, they were able to claim the full amount for the second quarter, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter on that 941 that was filed for the fourth quarter of 2020. Okay, and they could claim the ERC on there completely without having to adjust the second quarter and the third quarter as well. Okay, and that's for employers that had qualified wages that were spread out throughout all these quarters. So again, for this example, we're assuming that this employer only had qualified wages in the second quarter, and he wants to complete the adjustment to claim a credit based on qualified wages for 1 week out of 3 weeks that he had those qualified wages. Okay, so let's take a look here now. Again, part one, it says select only one process. See page 6 for additional guidance, including information on how to treat employment tax credits and Social Security tax deferrals. So what you want to do is obviously go to the instructions. They're telling you go to the instructions for guidance. So part one, I already have it checked here, okay, and I highlighted what this is for, okay. So but we're still going to go here and find out what we're talking about. So I did highlight on the instructions. You'll notice this is the most current revision that they have for the 941X instructions. I highlighted the worksheet 2 that we're going to be using to calculate the employee retention credit. Okay. So essentially, what you want to do is scroll down. Okay, general instructions. Okay, and then they have per sections. So here, this is what we want to look at. So we're in part one. Okay, select only one process. Okay, and so I highlighted here so we can take a closer look at that. Okay, and it says if you're filing Form 941X to adjust only an employment tax credit, that's what we're doing, employment tax credit. Okay. And or the amount of Social Security tax deferred, and you're not correcting any over-reported taxes on Form 941X, lines 6 through 13, skip lines 4 and 5, okay? So what that instruction means to me is that when we go here, we're gonna skip these parts here, these sections. So 4 and 5, we're going to skip those. Okay. So for box 2, we want to determine what should I check. Okay. In our case, we know that we're checking this box if you have an over-reported tax amount only and you would like to use the claim process to ask for a refund or abatement of the amount shown on line 27. Don't check this box if you're correcting any underreported tax amount on this form. So for that, you would use this. So if you find that you made a mistake and you underreported the tax that you actually owed, then you're going to be checking this box unless unless you're within the 90 days here on the instructions. So don't check box on line 1 if you're correcting over-reported tax amounts, and the period of limitations on credit or refund for Form 941 will expire within 90 days of the date you file Form 941. So we're a little ways off from this applying, but if you do find a mistake, you'll wanna do check that, and then there's special instructions for that as well. Okay, but we're gonna stick with what we're doing right now, which is trying to claim that credit. Okay, so again, we're gonna skip lines 4 and 5 because we're only using this form to adjust for an employment tax credit. Okay, so you do still have to certify here on box 3 that you filed or you will file the W-2 statements. Okay, so you still have to certify that. And then, so down here, I highlighted this here, okay? Because if you're like me, you likely like to put zeros on all these empty boxes. You don't like to see empty boxes like that. You're always afraid somebody's gonna write something in there, okay? I just included that there, okay? The year that's being corrected, and then up here, of course, you would say this is the second quarter that I'm trying to correct, okay? Down here, we have the non-refundable portion. So if you were correcting any of these amounts, this is where you would place those amounts. Okay, non-refundable portion of the credit for qualified sick and family leave. Okay, we're gonna skip that because that won't apply. Okay, so you have to recall that we already paid the tax liability, the payroll tax liability that was owed for that period. Okay, it's already been covered. So we're looking at only the refundable portion. Okay, so whatever credit we can claim is going to be refundable because the tax liability has already been paid. Okay, and we're gonna find out how we get this amount in a little bit. Okay, so let's go to the instructions. Okay, all the way to the top. These page numbers here, they're links to the actual pages. Okay, so we're gonna use worksheet 2, adjusted employee retention credit for qualified wages paid after March 12 and before July 1st, 2021. Okay, so that's what we need to compute our credit, and then enter it in the appropriate box to make the adjustment. Okay, so we click on it here, and it takes us to this form. I've already filled it out. Again, we're keeping things simple, okay? So we have up here, the first item is if you're correcting any of these amounts for these credits, okay? Again, for the work opportunity credit and for research activities by a qualified small business, okay? So we're going to assume 0 again, okay, to keep it simple. And we have here on 1B, we enter the amount of Social Security wages from Form 941. Okay, so again, those Social Security wages amounted to 30,000. Okay, looked like I had an extra 0, but I don't. Okay, 1C, enter the amount of Social Security tips. So again, we kept that at 0. We add the 2 lines, we get 30,000. Okay, and then we multiply by 6.2%. Okay, so we're going to multiply it. This is again the employer portion of the wages here. Okay, so again here on this line, we're going to multiply by 6.2, which corresponds to the amount that was that would correspond to the $30,000, the tax amount in terms of Social Security. So we would have that tax liability, which we already paid through the sick leave credit. Okay, but we still have to enter it there to complete the worksheet. These amounts here, if you're a third party, again, that we're assuming that doesn't apply to us, so we have 0 here. So we go here to this line, employer share of Social Security tax included on Form 941X, line 20. So if we were adjusting the tax, the Social Security tax, then we would have the corrected amount there. Okay, so these are essentially just for corrections also. Okay, so we have a 0 amount, okay, because we're not correcting that. If you receive the Section 3121 notice and demand, we're assuming no, so 0 amount there. And then essentially what you have is employer share of Social Security tax, which is 1860. Okay, enter the amount or the corrected amount here. So again, we have 0. Enter the amount from 5884C. We have 0. Okay, enter the amount for 5884D. Again, we have 0. And then, so at the end of the day, we have in line 1N here, employer share of Social Security tax remaining. Again, we have the 1860. Okay. So figure the employee retention credit. So we're going to assume that we had qualified wages for that third week that amounted to $2,500. Okay. And again, we're going to just assume for simplicity that these amounts here for health plan expenses and qualified wages, excluding qualified health expenses paid between March 13 and March 31st of 2020. So that final portion of that first quarter. Okay, we're going to assume that that's still 0, and also 0 for this line here. Okay, qualified health plan expenses allocable to qualified wages paid from March 13 again for that final part of the first quarter. Okay, we're going to assume that that's 0. Okay, we add lines 2A, 2B, and 2C. Okay, so essentially these are qualified wages, nothing changes, so it still remains at 2,500. Okay, the retention credit, if you're correcting the second, third, and fourth quarter of 2020, multiply line 2E by 50%. Okay, so again, if you didn't understand the notices or the items in the notices from the IRS were too complicated, and you have a very simple instruction here. Okay, so for 2020, you want to do 50%. But if you're correcting for the second quarter, for the first or second quarter of 2021, you want to multiply line 2E by 70%. Okay, so we're going to get half of this amount as a credit, so that's 1250. Okay, enter the amount of the employer share of Social Security tax from step 1. So we're going to put 1860 there. Enter the amount of non-refundable portion of the credit for qualified sick and family leave wages for leave taken between March 31st and before April 1st, 2021. Okay, so again, so for here, we have the amount that we already used. So the amount of the non-refundable portion of the credit. Okay, so remember, we claimed that when we originally filed the 941. Okay, and so we have that total non-refundable credits. That's right there. So you're going to include it here so that it's going to offset the Social Security liability, the tax liability created by that Social Security tax. It's going to essentially be reduced to 0 because it's already been paid through the other credit. Okay, so subtract line 2H from line 2G, we get 0. Okay, so the non-refundable portion. So here, if you still had, a tax liability based on Social Security or Medicare tax, of course, you would have something remaining here, but then you can use the credit to cover that. Okay, but since we don't, because the full amount was paid back when the return was originally filed, we have that. We'll get a full refund of the credit. Okay, so we have the 1250 here. Okay. Once we calculate the amount of the credit that we're entitled to receive, then we go to our form here. And again, if any line doesn't apply, you leave it blank. Okay. So the only line that we're going to be adjusting will be line 26A, which corresponds to the refundable portion of employee retention credit. Okay. So the amount, the total corrected amount for all employees. Okay. In this case, we're assuming the 2, and this is the amount that they qualify for. Okay, so the total corrected amount is 1250. Okay, the amount originally reported as previously corrected for our employees, or as previously corrected for our employees, that's going to be 0 because we didn't claim it and we haven't corrected it yet. Okay, so we have 0 here. The difference between those two, okay, very simple. 1250 minus 0, you still get 1250. Now, for this column 4 box here, okay, the instructions say that if you have a positive amount in column 3, you need to record it as a negative amount in this box here on column 4. Okay, and I think it was here. So you have, if line 27 is in 0, okay, this one you want to apply a credit to the form 941, okay, and it tells you that you should go to the instructions. So let me go to the relevant section. Okay, so here. So here we have the instructions when you have a negative amount. Okay, so to properly show the credit increase as a reduction to your tax balance, enter the positive number in column 3 as a negative number in column 4. Here's how you would enter the numbers from form 941X 917. So column 1, you have 2,000. Column 2 is 1,000. The difference between those two is 1,000. Okay, so that's positive. Okay, so on column 4, that's how you would enter it, a negative 1,000 to claim that refund. Okay, so that's what we did here. So here, if you had underreported the tax owed, you would have an amount in one of these boxes, whatever the amount was as originally reported on a 941. This amount here would be less because you underreported. The actual amount will be greater here. Okay, so a tax that you actually owed would be greater than you reported. Okay, so then subtracting a smaller number from a greater number would result in a negative number in column 3 here. So when you have that, then you would enter that negative amount as a positive amount on column 4. Okay, and so that would mean is that you owe that tax. You need to pay that tax. Okay, so if we were correcting that and we had an amount, a positive amount in this column here, of course that would be offset by any credit in any of the boxes on this form. Okay, so just in case if you have other 941 forms that you need to adjust, you know that's how the process is going to look here. Okay, so be very careful with those signs in front of the numbers. Okay, if the forms are correct, it's easier for the IRS to process. Okay, because they don't have to contact you and find out what happened. All right, so that's how you enter this. Okay, and so the total would be that 1250. So I wanted to point out that if you're a recovery startup business, okay, you have a box that you have to check here. Check here if you're eligible for the employee retention credit in the third or fourth quarter of 2021, solely because your business is a recovery startup business. So you would check that, okay, if that applies. So I also want to point out that if you're using this form only to make this adjustment, we're essentially done here, okay? So if you check line 2, this is the amount you want refunded or abated, okay? So we have our amount there that we want to get refunded. And then we would skip to this because, again, in our example, it doesn't apply. We're not making any other corrections or any other adjustments. Okay, we're not going to check here, okay, because we don't have both. So you have to have both to check that box. Okay, and check here if any corrections involve reclassified workers. We're not doing that either, so we're going to leave that blank. Okay, here on line 43. Okay, on line 43, you must give a detailed explanation of how you determine your corrections. Okay, and the IRS provides you guidance on that as well. Okay, what you don't want to do is you don't want to write something like claiming ERC for prior period, and then just a period at the end and call it a day and then sign it and send it. You don't want to do that, okay, because they'll call you and they'll ask for clarification. Okay, so let's look at what they mean by a detailed explanation. So again, this is the section of the instructions relevant to providing an explanation to the IRS. And it says, again, explanations such as Social Security and Medicare wages were overstated, or administrative payroll errors were discovered, or taxes were not withheld, or insufficient and may delay processing of your Form 941X. Now, I want to remind you that because of the amount of 941Xs being sent to the IRS to make an adjustment for the ERC, the processing times are not as fast as they used to be. Okay, so if you have more volume, of course, it's going to take longer to process these returns. So It's currently taking, again, between 6 to 8 months for them to process these, and they still have a backlog. You can check to see if, I forget how many they have backlog right now, but they do still have a backlog of these adjustments to the 941, and that's taking a while. So you don't want to do this because it's just going to delay it more than necessary. Okay, so provide the following information in your explanation for each correction. Okay, so you want to say form 941X, the line numbers that are affected. Okay, so for us, the line numbers would be here 26A. Okay, and then it says date you discover the error. Again, you would go to page 1 at the top. Okay, and you would reference this date, and you would say, hey, I was doing this and I found this mistake. Okay, so the difference, the amount of the error, okay, and the cause of the error. So those 4 items you want to address in your explanation down here. Okay, so make sure at the very least you mention these 4 items. Okay, and they provide you an example of what that would look like. So it says the $1,000 difference shown in column 3 on line 6, 8, and 12 was discovered on May 15, 2023 during an internal payroll audit. We discovered that we included $1,000 of wages for one of our employees twice. This correction removes the reported wages that were never paid. So something similar to that. Okay. So on this date, we discovered that we qualified for this ERC. It affected lines, 26. What was it? B or A? Oh, wrong form. So here, 26A. Okay. And so you would provide that explanation, and lost my page again. Anyway, so you go down here and you do something similar. You provide an explanation that the IRS is going to consider sufficient. Okay, so these are the amounts that were corrected, and I'm filing the correction or the adjustment to claim a refund on this credit.